All right, so we got another Dynamite in the books, and I predicted that it would be a really good show, and surprise, surprise, it was, as Dynamite usually is. They don't put on bad shows. I think there's only been like 2 or 3 in the history of that show that I was just like, this is not a good show. And was it the big historic show that I thought it was going to be? No. So I guess that was, in a sense, a letdown. I did feel like starting the show off with Malachi Black versus Dustin Rhodes, and that match was not great, I would say. I know a lot of people really enjoyed it, and Malachi Black has this great entrance, this great look and everything, but I just felt like those two guys didn't really have any chemistry. I would not have started the show off with that. I think that this was one of the more anticipated episodes of Dynamite in the history of that show, and I would have started it off with Bryan Danielson, the American Dragon. I would have kicked it off with that Elite and Bryan Danielson segment, started it off hot. I know that's WCW Nitro-esque, but I would have really kicked it off with what the most anticipated segment was for the majority of the viewing audience, which would have been that, and then started the show with the matches after that, and then maybe put that Punk segment on a little bit later. But the segments that happened were still great. I just personally would have started it off with that, because whenever I tuned in last night, I really wanted to see that one right away. To the fact that I watch on DVR, I almost just fast forwarded all the way to that segment, started from there and then the main event, and then went back to the show. But instead, to get an accurate depiction of what the show really was, I went ahead and watched it from the beginning. And I still feel that they should have started it off with the Danielson segment. But what I really want to talk about is Jon Moxley and Minoru Suzuki. This was probably the most anticipated match for me in the history of Dynamite. I know that there's probably been bigger, more commercially successful matches, but their match from 2020, I think it was in February of 2020 in New Japan, I voted that one as the number 2 match of the year, behind the Adam Page, Kenny Omega versus Young Bucks match. So for that year, I just absolutely adored that match. It was so fun to watch. Just two crazy guys just having a brawl, and they went at it for a long time. Just an awesome match. And so I was super pumped for this one, especially because it was in Moxley's hometown and you knew the crowd was going to go crazy. But unfortunately, it didn't get a ton of time. That doesn't mean that it was a bad match, because it wasn't. It was like the time that we got was excellent. You naturally will compare it to their previous match in New Japan, and the New Japan match blows this match away. But it started off kind of down from the beginning, because for whatever reason AEW cut off Suzuki's music a little bit too early, so we didn't get that Kazani Nare chant from the audience. They didn't get a chance to sing along, so that didn't go over too well. And then of course Moxley comes out and he's super popular, and then they had this great brawl, and then they cut to a commercial right as Suzuki's starting to take over, and he gets an armbar on the ropes during the commercial break, and I was like, oh my gosh. And I get it, they have to go to commercials, and it makes sense to go to commercial during the main event, because that's usually when you're peaking the show. But it was a bit frustrating, because as I said, I watched one of my favorite matches ever. Like, I'm not just talking about of 2020. One of my favorite matches ever is Jon Moxley and Minoru Suzuki from New Japan. So they go to commercial, they come back again, super crazy brawl. They had Suzuki kick out of the paradigm shift, and he got a paradigm shift and a lariat, and he kicked out at 1, which I thought was cool. Suzuki gets busted open, going back and forth, and then Moxley hits a modified version of a paradigm shift. He didn't really hit it all the way. It looked more like a double arm suplex, and because he definitely didn't come down on it like a DDT style, but he got the victory, big pop, and then he goes and celebrates in the audience in his hometown of Cincinnati, and really cool way to close the show. I certainly hope we get to see this again in some type of way in AEW. I think that there's unfinished business here. And Suzuki, for all the people, the naysayers, that talk about New Japan stars coming into America, going onto American television, and them not being over, that was not the case here. Suzuki transcends audiences. He transcends cultures. His facials, his intimidation, and he's not a big guy. I think that if he were to go back into fighting, he literally could probably fight at 155. I know he could at least get to 170. But he is a guy that he absolutely transcends cultures, and if you don't know who he is, the moment he steps through the curtain, you know that he's a bad motherfucker, and that's the cool thing about Suzuki. He is a crazy badass. All you have to do is look him up, take a quick Google search, and you'll understand just exactly who this guy is. And he's had some of the greatest matches in not only in New Japan history, but in wrestling history. If you want to go back and Google him. Chris Samza, who does some analytics and stuff like that for New Japan. He breaks down statistics and stuff like that for them. He actually tweeted out a link to their very match on New Japan World. So go ahead and check that out from New Japan. And then of course the New Japan World already has the AEW match up. But do yourself a favor, watch the New Japan match first, and then you'll see what I'm talking about. Again, a little disappointed in the match, but that's because I built it up so big. That does not mean whatsoever that it was a bad match, because it wasn't. It was still a really good match. So big thumbs up for Dynamite. They're clearly building to their Grand Slam show on September 22nd from Arthur Ashe Stadium. If any show is going to be beating Raw, I think that would be the show to do it. They're already setting up to be big. They got Cody Rhodes returning, taking on Malachi Black, MJF and Brian Pillman Jr., and it should be a stack show. So on September 22nd, it looks like that's going to be a big show. And then next week, they actually have Adam Cole's in-ring debut, and he's going to take on Frankie Kazarian, so that should be cool. I think that's a great first opponent for Cole, and it should be an awesome match, and Cole should be getting the W there. And so, anyway, that's going to do it for me, guys. Talk to you later. Bye.